One of the biggest hurdles for new guitar players is learning how to switch chords smoothly. This is a skill that takes some time, but you can speed up the process if you study common fingers, guide fingers, and similar chord shapes. Let's start off by looking at some common fingers. If two chords have common fingers, that means that at least one finger is going to stay the same as you switch from one chord to the next. For example, with an A minor and a D7, here's our A minor. When I switch to D7, notice that the first finger is the same in both chords, so rather than lifting all my fingers up and then putting them back down for the D7, I'm going to keep my first finger down and then just swing the other two over to get to the D7. This is all about being as efficient as possible. The less you have to move your fingers, the faster you'll be able to play. Next we have a D minor and a G7. These two chords have the first finger in common. So if I have a D minor here and I'm moving to a G7, I'm not going to lift all my fingers up and then put them back down for the G7. Instead, I'm going to keep my first finger down and move my other fingers in place for the G7. Next we have B7 and E. These share the second finger. So if I'm playing a B7 and I'm moving to the E chord, I keep my second finger down, I just sort of pivot on that finger and then move the others around. You can do the same thing with B7 and E7. Also the second finger is the same. B7, keep second finger down. There's my E7. You can do the same thing with B7 and E minor. B7, second finger stays down, E minor. All right. So that was common fingers, and now we're going to take a look at guide fingers. With a guide finger, you don't have the same finger on the same fret, but one finger may just move from one fret to the next on the same string. Our first guide finger example is the G and the D7. If you're fingering your G with fingers 1, 2, and 3, there are no fingers in common with a D7. However, this third finger is only one fret away from where it needs to be for the D7. So when I move from G to D7, instead of picking up all my fingers and putting them down for the D7, I take that third finger that's already down, just slide it over one, and then move my other two fingers in place. So you can just slide that third finger back and forth when you play those two chords. Now we have an A and an E. Now this is an A if I'm fingering it with fingers 2, 1, and 3. Most people first learn this chord fingering 1, 2, 3, which is easier to remember, but I find that personally a little more difficult to play because my fingers don't fit very well. So I use fingers 2, 1, and 3 for the A. Now when I do that, I have a guide finger that will help lead me to the E chord. The first finger only has to move over one fret to get to the E chord. So I slide that one finger and then move the others into place as well. You can do the same thing with E7s. A, E7. First finger just slides back and forth. If you can't move from one chord to the next with a guide finger or keeping in common finger, those chords still may have a similar shape. Let's look at some examples. The A minor and the E do not share any common fingers and there's no guide finger. However, if you look at the diagrams, they're shaped exactly the same. So, there's my A minor. To get to the E chord, I try to keep my fingers in that same grouping, and then I just move them up one string each to the E. And of course I move them back the other way for the A minor. Again, it's all about moving as little as possible, just being very, very efficient. Next we have A7 and D7. So here's our A7, and I'm playing this with fingers 2, 3. If I'm playing my A7 with fingers 2 and 3, then to get to the D7, all I have to do is take these two fingers that are already down, move them down one string each, and then put my first finger down for the D7. And then, of course, if I'm going back to the A7, you just reverse all that. So again, I'm trying to move my fingers as little as possible when I move between chords. And if you notice some similarities in the shapes, that can help quite a bit. Now we have an A7 and a D chord. This time I'm fingering the A7 with fingers 1 and 2. To get to the D chord, now I just have to move those two fingers down one string each, put my third finger down, and I've got a D chord. So even though there are no guide fingers, no common fingers, the shapes are similar enough that if you study them, it makes it fairly easy to get between those two chords. Next we have G7 and C. So here's our G7. And if you look at the diagram, the G7 and the C chords look pretty similar. All you have to do to get from the G7 to the C chord is move fingers 2 and 3 down one string each, and finger 1 up one string, and you've got a C chord. When I was first learning the G7 and the C chords, I kind of thought of the G7 as a spread out version of a C chord. And then finally we have the G and C chords. This time I'm fingering the G with fingers 2, 3, and 4. Earlier I fingered it with 1, 2, and 3, but now I'm doing it 2, 3, and 4. It's very helpful to know different ways to finger the same chords. If I'm playing G with fingers 2, 3, and 4, then to get to the C chord, all I have to do is move fingers 2 and 3 down one string each, and then put my first finger down for the C. And then, of course, reverse that to get to the G chord. Moving my fingers as little as possible. I showed you a few examples of chords with common fingers, guide fingers, or similar chord shapes, and there are plenty more. The best thing you can do is when you learn a new chord, study that chord and see what it has in common with the other chords that you already know. This is not going to help you play chords faster overnight, but if you put in this kind of work now, it's going to pay off big time later. If you're looking for a handy chord reference, click on the downloads link in the description below and look for the Open Chord Diagrams PDF. This download is totally free. If you got something out of this video, please give it a thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe if you'd like to see some more guitar tips. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.